The 7-ray methods used in the construction process. Until the stage of projection is reached, the methods employed by all disciples on all rays are identical. Their intention is one, and they all have to attain the same measure of tension and of preparation for the construction of the bridge by gathering the needed energy from two sources, the personality and the soul. By this focusing and its resultant tension, by thus evoking the spiritual triad and starting the dual process of building from both ends of the bridge, if such a phrase is possible and permissible, the work goes forward uniformly. The use of the creative imagination is now called forth, and this forms the second stage. This presents a real difficulty for the first ray and the 7th ray aspirants. Neither type can with facility organize the material energy, orient energy currents, and see their objective clearly in the mind's eye pictorially. It is a process which is profoundly difficult for them. It must, however, in some way be done because the use of the visual imagination is an essential factor in the building process and one of the major means of focusing prior to projection. This process of projection falls into 3 main activities. 1. After due focusing and after careful, sequential, and systematic picturing the rainbow bridge, the disciple, by a distinct and separate effort, calls in the will aspect of his nature as far as he can in this incarnation. It is in this connection that the differing ray methods make their appearance, the difference being determined by the quality of the ray life. And 2, the disciple has to preserve steadily the triple consciousness, not simply theoretically, but also factually, so that 3 paralleling lines of thought, or 3 streams of active energy, are used by him simultaneously. A. He is aware of himself, personality, and soul as occupied with the process of bridge building. He never for 1 second loses his sense of conscious identity. B. He is aware of the point of focused tension which he has succeeded in producing, and that 3 streams of energy have contributed to it: the focused energy of the personality, poised in the lower concrete mind, the inflowing magnetic energy of the soul, streaming out from the 12 petals of the 3 tiers, plus the innermost tier of the egoic lotus, and the energy of the jewel in the lotus, all streaming into the center of tension on the mental levels of the lower mind. C. He is aware of as much of the consciousness of his ray energy as can enter into his awareness. This is his egoic ray energy and not personality force. He endeavors to see himself as a point of particular energy colored by his ray life, and carefully bears in mind that the energy of his egoic ray is the major energy through which the monad is attempting to express itself, and also that his threefold egoic vehicle is a reflection of and closely related to the 3 aspects of the spiritual triad. It is this relation and its conscious interplay and effect which is evoked by the building of the ANTAHKARANA, and which eventually, when it is powerful enough, brings into radiant activity the jewel in the lotus. When these 3 stages of realization have been completed as far as the disciple feels he is capable of carrying them, then and only then does he prepare himself for the distinctive use of his ray method in preparing for the projecting sound or word of power. You can see from all the above that this constitutes a definitely planned process of a basic scientific nature, and requires as careful following as the procedure of any scientist in search of some advanced chemical formula. The only difference, scientifically speaking, is that the whole process is carried forward upon subjective levels and in the realm of consciousness, thus requiring a consciousness and a concentration not needed when working more tangibly on the outer plane of awareness. At first it seems complicated as the disciple tries to master the different stages of the process, but it all becomes entirely automatic when once mastered. Here is a summary of a process up to the point of definite projection. 1. Intention, producing focusing and tension. 2. Visualization, produced by 1. The Buddhic activity of impression. 2. The tension of the mental body. 3. The imaginative processes of the astral body. And then we have 3. Projection. 1. The calling in of the will aspect. 2. The preservation of a triple state of awareness in order that A. The disciple is aware constantly of his own identity. B. He is conscious of a fixed point of tension. C. He is aware actively of his soul ray or his soul energy. 3. He starts in to use that distinctive ray energy correctly. 4. He then, when all the above is completed, uses the word of power, which is the agent of his will. This short tabulation should aid in the process, and you can see how stage grows out of stage, and how, once familiarity has been established, it should be possible for the preliminary work to be rapidly carried forward. When, however, the distinctive methods of the ray energy of the disciple reach the point of definite use, it is not so simple as it sounds. Success in the building process is dependent upon the ability of the disciple to do 3 things. 1. Hold the mind steady in the light, i.e., preserving the point of tension at its highest possible point at any given time in the disciple's unfoldment and building activity. 2. Register consciousness of soul contact, thus bringing about an increasing fusion between the soul and the personality, so that complete at-one-ment is increasingly attained. Technically, this means that the energy of the soul ray and of the personality ray merge together, with the soul ray dominating always. 3. Hold in mind, specifically and in detail, the method to be employed in building the bridge according to the particular ray technique, and with the objective in view of relating, in a new and significant matter, factually and not just theoretically, the spiritual triad and the personality. The soul, therefore, as a separate entity, is fading slowly out of the picture because it is being absorbed into and by the personality, which is becoming more and more the soul in incarnation. Eventually, the relation is established between spirit, monad, and personality, form or matter, with a tiny point of consciousness eternally present, which is aware of both these factors and yet preserves inviolate its own identity. This latter realization is the result of aeonian work carried forward by the soul. Paradoxically, we say that the soul fades or drops out, yet in the last analysis it remains, for in this solar system there is naught else but only this consciousness of being. One point I would touch upon here before taking up the 7 ray methods of projection. The bridge to be built is called frequently the rainbow bridge because it is constituted of all the colors of the 7 rays. Speaking specifically, and from the angle of the disciple, the bridge which he builds between the personality and the spiritual triad is composed of 7 strands of energy, or 7 streams of force. He uses all the 7 rays, having gained facility in so doing, because again and again his personality has, in the long cycle of incarnations, been on all the 7 rays many times. But his soul ray dominates eventually, and in the rainbow bridge, the colors of his ray are heard vibrating, the note of his ray is seen. The bridge built by humanity as a whole is one bridge composed of the multiplicity of individual bridges built by the many disciples. It is therefore formed eventually of 7 strands or streams of energy coming from the 7 egoic groups, one group of each ray type. To this bridge, the creative work of all human beings who reach the stage of soul contact contributes. Their dominant strands of light fuse into one whole, and their lesser strands are lost to sight in the radiant light of the 7-fold bridge which humanity will eventually complete. Even in this finally completed bridge, at the end of the world cycle, one ray light and color will predominate, the second ray, with the 4th ray as the subsidiary ray. The 4th ray might be symbolically called the main cable for humanity, because it is the dominant note of the 4th creative hierarchy. Now let us take up the 7 ray methods one by one. As we consider these ray techniques with their accompanying words of power, you must bear carefully in mind that we are dealing entirely with the will aspect. This necessitates a higher process of alignment and the evocation of a divine aspect hitherto relatively quiescent, except insofar as the will finds its reflection in the activity of the sacrifice petals of the egoic lotus, plus its distorted shadow in the mind nature. This consequently posits a fairly high stage of spiritual unfoldment upon the part of the builder of the ANTAHKARANA. It means that there are indications of it, to say the least, between the mind, the sacrifice petals, and the atmic principle. This may be simply the most tenuous thread imaginable, 1,000 times finer than a gossamer web, but it must inevitably be present. When, from the angle of the esotericist, this is a tangible fact, you will then have the following direct contact. But we have the monad and its 3 aspects, the atmic principle, the monastic permanent atom, the ANTAHKARANA, the mental unit, the head center, and the center at the base of the spine. And then we also have the sacrifice petal sitting over here. So very interesting. This contact, when completed, marks an entire unit of spiritual work, if I might so word it, bringing the man upon the physical plane into complete alignment. This unity is consummated at the time of the 4th initiation, the great renunciation, at which time the first aspect begins to dominate the other 2. Then the soul life, as hitherto understood, fades out and the causal body disappears. The sum total of memory, quality, and acquirements is then absorbed into the monad. The words, "I and my Father are one," become true. The astral body also vanishes in the same great process of renunciation, and the physical body, as an automatic agent of the vital body, is no longer needed, though it persists and serves a purpose when so required by the monad. From the form aspect, you then have the monad, the sphere of the spiritual triad, and the etheric body upon the physical plane. I would here remind you that the levels of conscious existence which we regard as formless are only relatively so, because our 7 planes are the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. The center of consciousness is now in the will nature when this point of attainment is reached and is no longer in the love nature. Activity and love are still present in full measure, but the focus of the initiate's attention is in the will aspect of divinity. It has been said in an ancient book belonging to the Master's archives that the preservation of values is the task of the initiate of the first ray. The attainment of positivity is the goal of the initiate of the second ray. He who works upon the third ray must reach the path from here to there. The initiate of the fourth ray arrives at the will aspect when conflict steps into its rightful place and causes no undue concern. These four attainments mark the goal for men and sway them all upon the lower point of consciousness. The ray of vision and of application indicates the way direct, evokes the will to follow, and welds the love of God, the love of man, and all that breathes into the purpose underlying all. And towards that purpose and its earthly consummation, the seventh ray gives all it has. It has not been easy to put these abstruse ideas, expressed in the most archaic language and symbolism, into modern terms and words. I have but conveyed the general idea, the collaboration of all the seven rays in the building process of deity and their planned interaction on a tiny scale, infinitesimal in comparison with the great whole. Man responds within the circle of humanity, enclosed within the greater circle of the hierarchy, and becomes conscious of this fusion and uses the potencies of both groups of lives through the medium of the ANTAHKARANA. The moment the disciple approaches that point in consciousness and the ANTAHKARANA is firmly anchored, even if it has yet but a tenuous structure, he becomes aware of the factor of the greater cycle which encloses the other two, Shambhala, the secret place where the will of God is formulated for the immediate present and for the long-range future. With this vision and suggested preamble, let us now ascertain the 7 techniques to be employed at the projection stage of the building process. And we're going to leave it there for today, and we'll pick back up here tomorrow.